Why would Bank of America need Johnny Crypto's XRP, and why wouldn't they just go and purchase that off the open market for themselves?
Well, it's a little bit like how the banks work right now, right? There's that whole thing in the past where you had to, if you were going to deposit money in the bank, you had to do it by 10 a.m. because at 10:01 they were going to invest it. And I think it's going to work similar with the banks in the future, right? They're going to take loans, they're going to collateralize your XRP. You're basically giving them the liquidity to invest, which is what the bank.
They say banks control the world's money. But what if I told you they're practically begging you to dump XRP even though it could save them, and you a mind-blowing $39 trillion every single year? Think about that for a second. $49 trillion with a T. Enough to wipe out global debt, overhaul healthcare, and fund every climate initiative on the planet just by switching from the old clunky correspondent banking model to Ripple's blockchain and XRP. Why then are banks frantically warning you to sell? What are they so desperate to protect? And what secret forces are at play behind the scenes that could send traditional finance into an existential crisis? Over the next few minutes, we'll unpack every detail, every number, every jaw-dropping fact that explains why banks are literally pleading with you. Don't hold XRP. Sell it before it's too late. By the end, you'll understand not only how these savings happen, but why incumbents will stop at nothing to maintain the status quo.
So basically, the technology that we're creating for the digital Lari is a private blockchain, but it's based on the technology used in the public blockchain. So the public blockchain that we use is called the XRP ledger. It's a publicly available open source blockchain technology. And what we do for each country we're working with, we create a new private version. So you can only use the blockchain if you are permissioned to do so. So the advantage of that is the XRP ledger technology is proven. It has been processing billions of transactions. But central banks like to have things a little bit more private. So we have created a private version.
So banks are already using XRP's private ledger, and as crypto and Ripple's adoption continues to flourish and grow, soon XRP's price will skyrocket as the private ledger is meant to reflect the same price as the public ledger.
Let's rewind to how global payments work today. Imagine sending money from New York to London. In the simplest form, your bank has to pre-fund accounts. They lock up dollars in New York and pounds in London, sitting idle until needed. These are called Nostro and Vostro accounts, and the total value parked worldwide in this web of pre-funding sits at nearly $27 trillion. Money that could be circulating in the real economy, but is instead chained to outdated processes. Now multiply that by the average cost banks charge, 2 to 3% per transaction, and consider that the foreign exchange, FX market, moves about $7.5 trillion every single day on some 7 million to 8 million transactions. At 3%, that's roughly $225 billion drained daily in fees, money siphoned off, never to fuel growth or pay dividends. Even at a conservative 1%, it's $75 billion per day. And all of this is before we talk about cross-border remittances, stock trading fees, derivatives, payroll friction, and countless other financial plumbing leaks.
Most people don't realize it, but every time they swipe a credit card, someone is making money. And it's not just the banks. Two companies sit at the center of nearly every transaction, Visa and MasterCard. They don't lend money. They don't take on credit risk. It's about knowing when to buy more and when to hold back. Visa and MasterCard are financial powerhouses. Together, they control nearly 90% of the global payments market. No serious competition, no major disruptions. Just a near monopoly on how money moves worldwide. It's not about trading constantly. It's not about guessing market movements. It's about adjusting your investment weight when opportunities arise. Because history has shown something fascinating.
Enter Ripple and the XRP ledger. The XRP ledger processes transactions at a cost of roughly $0.00002 each. That's 2/10,000ths of a cent. Plugging that figure into our FX example, 7.5 million transactions per day means the total daily cost plummets to about $1,500 instead of $75 billion. In a year, that delta compounds to roughly $27 trillion in savings for banks and customers alike. Let's zoom out. The global stock market sees some $200 billion in daily trading volume on major exchanges, where commissions and fees often average 1 to 2%. That's around $4 billion in fees a day. If those trades ran on XRP, around $400 per day in fees, saving $3.9996 billion every single day. Shocking? Consider cross-border payments, which some estimates place at $21 trillion moved per day. Today's SWIFT-based fees, anywhere from 2% to 5%, translate to $15 billion per day. Through XRP, even using a $0.00002 fee, you're looking at under $5,000 per day, a $15 billion versus $5,000 showdown that reveals potential annual savings well north of $30 trillion.
Let's talk XRP. Most people focus on the market cap. That's just price times the number of coins. But that number doesn't tell you what really matters. XRP isn't just a coin. It's a lightning-fast money mover, able to send funds across the globe in just 3 seconds. That's the real power of XRP. Not hype, not speculation, utility. Right now, it's trading around $2, but if adoption grows, if banks, companies, and countries start using it more, it could reach $5, maybe even $10. Some dream of $100. Could it happen? Only if XRP becomes the global engine for moving money. That's like turning a toy car into a space rocket. It's possible, but it won't be overnight. So forget the hype and the moonshots for a second. XRP stands out because it's fast, cheap, and built for real-world use. And that's why the future might just run on XRP. Remember, always do your own research for information.
But let's peel back the curtain. Why are banks terrified of XRP? Because these savings undermine their billions of dollars a day revenue stream. Every basis point they shave off fees hits their bottom line. And if large institutions adopt blockchain for liquidity, messaging, settlement, custody, and tokenization, functions Ripple already delivers within weeks instead of years, they face a technological existential threat. Ripple's own data shows over 90% coverage of the global FX market and some 27 million transactions processed since 2016, representing roughly $50 billion in notional value, all without pre-funding requirements. Major banks in Europe, Asia, and the Americas are in pilot or production phases, from HSBC to Santander, Standard Chartered to DBS. They're testing XRP-based corridors for on-demand liquidity, tokenization of assets, and seamless remittances. Then there's the stablecoin angle. Ripple's regulated stablecoin, $RSV, previously called USDR, has seen daily volumes spike from tens of millions to hundreds of millions in mere months. As banks pilot their own tokenized currencies, they'll lean on regulated rails, exactly where Ripple fits. Imagine Bank of America moving 100% of its internal transactions onto XRP and RSV, unlocking over $2 trillion in balance sheet liquidity. Their customers would benefit from near zero fees, instant settlement, and 24/7 availability, rather than the archaic 9 to 5 banking hours.
Y'all, you tell me, are they getting rid of the ATMs because they don't want you to have money in your pocket?
So while we see smaller regional banks starting to close their doors or close up shop for their ATMs for cash, what do you guys think? What do you think is happening here? Clearly, banks are limiting the amount of cash they hold in their vaults, and they're transitioning everything to digital. So the elites of the world want a cashless society because that gives them full control and ability to track all of your transactions, all of your payments, and throttle your money on what you can and what you can't spend it on.
The largest global institutions are not blind to this. JP Morgan, Citi, UBS, and countless regional banks are running test nodes on the XRP network, evaluating performance, security, regulatory compliance, and integration. They're looking at how quickly Ripple on-demand liquidity can free up trapped capital, and how securely token custody solutions can handle trillions in digital assets. Every successful pilot raises the question, why pay banks billions in fees when you could switch to XRP for pocket change? Beyond banks, look at everyday people. Most workers get paid once or twice a month, trapped by payroll cycles. On-chain payroll could pay hourly or even by task, giving gig workers immediate access to funds, revolutionizing personal finance and ending payday lending traps. Brad Garlinghouse, Ripple's CEO, often points out that blockchain-based payroll could supercharge millions living paycheck to paycheck, creating a dynamic labor economy never before possible.
JP Morgan finally coming out and calling out Gary Gensler because, they've been building now for the last few years behind the scenes, right? And then we just saw the article that you just showed with the NASDAQ saying that they're going to custody your crypto. You know, we've been saying this, that your banks, our banks, the major top banks are going to soon, they're going to come out and they're going to say, hey, we'll custody your crypto, right? And so pretty soon it's going to go from, you know, being poison and all the negative things that they say about it. All of a sudden, once they have the custody part down, they have the wallets down, they have it all set up, that's when they'll come out and they'll endorse it, right? But it'll be a centralized version, right? It'll be traditional finance getting their hooks into digital assets and then allowing it to run.
Weigh this against incumbents. Legacy software vendors, correspondent banking giants, market-leading payment platforms, they all profit from friction. Reducing it threatens their millions in software licenses, transactional fees, and foreign exchange spreads. Naturally, they lobby regulators, fund FUD campaigns, and pressure media to cast blockchain and XRP as speculative or risky. Hence the warnings to sell. It's a defense mechanism, an attempt to slow adoption until they can build their own token rails or secure regulatory carve-outs. But the data doesn't lie. Independent studies by the IMF, the Bank for International Settlements, and multiple central banks confirm that digital assets like XRP and wholesale CBDC pilots could reduce cross-border transaction costs by 40 to 60%. McKinsey estimates blockchain-based settlements could unlock $1 trillion in value over 5 years. Deloitte reports that real-time payments could boost global GDP by over $100 billion annually. Which brings us full circle. Banks are begging you to sell XRP because if you hold, and if you pay attention, you'll realize that the game is rigged. The old guard is terrified of being disintermediated. They're desperate to keep the fee gravy train rolling. But the rails are changing. Ripple's network is live, regulatory clarity is advancing, and institutional demand for faster, cheaper, more transparent payments is surging.
Welcome back to the channel, everybody. So Ripple, this is on U.Today, Ripple is being reported has moved 1 billion XRP. This is nothing new, but there's a little tidbit here. It says how much XRP remains locked now. By the way, I hope you're all having a good morning. It says after the release, 54 billion XRP remained in escrow. Truth be told, I don't care at all. As long as they're sufficiently, XRPL is sufficiently decentralized and Ripple continues to bring in partnerships and build on the XRPL and spread that around, and other companies on the XRPL do the same, and everyone does their best, and the XRPL has a bright future, really that's all I care about.
As Ethereum, Bitcoin, and other networks vie for prominence, XRP's unique consensus mechanism, low energy, high throughput, near zero fees, makes it tailor-made for global finance. It's not just another token. It's the bridge asset built to integrate fiat on-ramps, custodial services, tokenized securities, and central bank digital currencies. And with every major bank pilot, every new partnership, every increase in transactional volume, the argument grows stronger. Hold XRP, because the old system won't survive intact. As we've seen, the power of XRP and the XRP ledger isn't just theoretical. It's playing out right now in pilots, partnerships, and proofs of concept with some of the world's largest financial institutions. But let's dig deeper into the forces shaping this transformation and why banks are so desperate for you to dismiss XRP before its true potential becomes impossible to ignore.
Can a blockchain really keep record of all the transactions in a safe and decentralized way? And how does it work? The answer is yes, and it's all thanks to a fascinating process called consensus mechanism. A consensus mechanism is a process used in distributed computer systems, including blockchain, to achieve agreement among multiple computers about the current state of the system. In a blockchain network, each node has a copy of the ledger, which contains a record of all the transactions in the network. And as the network is decentralized, the consensus mechanism comes in to validate transactions and ensure that all nodes agree on the current state of the ledger. This helps to ensure that the ledger remains secure and tamper-proof, even if some nodes are compromised or fail. If a node would try to compromise a blockchain, would have to do it on more than 50% of the nodes in order to don't just be left behind as a fake copy of the blockchain, which is nearly impossible.
First, consider the regulatory landscape. For years, the narrative around cryptocurrencies has been dominated by uncertainty, vague guidance, shifting enforcement priorities, and high-profile lawsuits. When Ripple was sued by the SEC in late 2020, many retail investors hit the panic button, selling off XRP en masse. Yet behind the scenes, regulators in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East have been quietly advancing frameworks for digital assets. In Singapore, the Monetary Authority has rolled out clear licensing for payment token services. In the UAE, the Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority offers regulatory sandboxes to fast-track innovation. Even the SEC, under new leadership, has signaled a willingness to distinguish between securities and utility tokens. Every piece of regulatory clarity chips away at the fear factor, laying a roadmap for banks to confidently deploy XRP in real-world use cases. Second, look at the competitive pressures. Big tech companies, think Facebook's Diem, formerly Libra, Amazon's rumored stablecoin plans, and Google's blockchain investments, are circling the payment space with huge war chests and unmatched user reach. Banks know that if they don't modernize, they risk being sidelined by platforms that already have billions of active users. Ripple's point of differentiation is that it plugs directly into existing banking infrastructures. Swift messaging, ISO 20022 compliance, and legacy core systems. That interoperability means banks can test XRP corridors without a full systems overhaul, reducing implementation timelines from years to mere weeks. And as each pilot crosses success thresholds, lower costs, faster settlements, reduced capital requirements, the momentum builds, creating a bandwagon effect that no bank wants to miss.
What I wish I knew last year, the Ripple SEC war is over and the details are astonishing. Let's dive in. On May 8, 2025, the SEC and Ripple Labs struck a game-changing settlement. Ripple's $125 million penalty slashed to $50 million, the remaining funds heading back to Ripple. But wait, there's more. The court injunction from August 2024, gone. Both parties will now ask the Second Circuit Court for a limited remand to finish the case. In the SEC's official statement, this settlement is not about the merits of the claims. It's about reforming crypto regulation. No precedent set here, folks. Remember, this saga started back in December 2020. The SEC accused Ripple of selling unregistered securities worth $1.3 billion. Fast forward to July 2023, Judge Torres ruled sales to institutional investors violated securities laws but not to retail investors. The twist? President Trump's second term in January 2025 changed the game. By March, a historic settlement was inked. This case...
Third, the network effects of adoption are already in play. Every bank that runs a Ripple node, every payment corridor that goes live on XRP, and every partnership with a custodial provider strengthens the network's utility. It's similar to how credit card networks gain dominance. As more merchants accepted Visa and MasterCard, more consumers carried those cards, which in turn drove more merchant adoption. XRP's low fees and high throughput create an irresistible value proposition. Why pay millions of dollars in liquidity costs when you can tap into the network's shared liquidity pool? As more banks and remittance companies adopt XRP, the pool grows deeper, spreads tighten, and transaction speed improves, further widening the gap between blockchain-based settlement and legacy rails. Finally, imagine the tipping point. One major global bank publicly announces full migration of its Latin American remittance corridors to XRP. A second bank follows suit the next quarter, highlighting a 50% reduction in operating costs. A third bank expands its pilot to include tokenized corporate bond settlements. Suddenly the narrative shifts from experimental blockchain to industry standard. That's when network effects accelerate, regulatory hurdles fall away, and even risk-averse institutions feel compelled to join or be left behind. Banks are begging you to sell XRP because they understand what's at stake: trillions in fee revenue, locked-up capital, and the very foundation of correspondent banking. But every pilot completed, every corridor launched, and every regulatory clarification is another nail in the coffin of the old guard. XRP isn't just another token. It's the bridge to a more efficient, transparent, and inclusive financial system. So as you watch banks plead for fear, remember the facts: faster settlements, near zero fees, instant liquidity, and a network effect that grows stronger with every new node. The question isn't whether blockchain will transform finance. It's when you'll realize that the future has already arrived. So if banks are begging you to sell XRP, Ask yourself, are they protecting you or protecting billions in fees? Will you stand by the outdated correspondent maze, or will you embrace the future of finance that delivers real savings, real speed, and real transparency? If you made it this far, hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives, and tell me in the comments, what would you do with your share of a $39 trillion windfall? Imagine the possibilities. Banks can plead all they want, but the numbers don't lie. The question is, will you listen?